lot more this summer because they're struggling, which means I feel like we're going to be going.
All right, it is 11 o'clock and we are here for the Bonner County Ambulance Service District Board meeting. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the order of the agenda.
Based on the information before us, I move to adopt the order of agenda as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any comment from the public? Seeing none, deliberation by the board. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Korn?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Commissioner Donkey?
Yes. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Motion passes. Next item is our FY25 claims batch, totaling $65,589.29.
Good morning. This claims batch, the largest one in it is the $28,125 for our quarterly state insurance fund payment. Other than that, all are regular bills.
All right. Any questions from the board on the bills?
I do have one. I see we're renting tanks from Oxart, I'm assuming for oxygen. Have we looked into seeing if we could save money if we actually purchase them, or is that a hassle?
You have to get them filled, though.
Yeah. So
What's that?
You have to get them filled.
Right, but you can buy the tank instead of renting the tank, such as oxyacetylene tanks and stuff. I own my tanks instead of renting my tanks.
I think the only thing that would be a downfall would be
Alan.
they can't swap them one for
Alan.
one.
Yeah, you have
Oh, sorry. The only thing that I could see, because what we do currently is if we have 15 at station one, they take 5, bring 5, but if we own them and they have to take that tank, I don't know if they would swap a 1-for-1 tank since we would own the tank.
Okay.
It's like our nitrous bottles, we have to drop off and it takes 3 weeks to like turn them around to get them back because we own those tanks.
Gotcha.
So I can check with Oxnard.
Would it be, would it be worth looking into at least and seeing what the cost savings might be?
Okay.
Or we may even be able to purchase 5 or 10 extra so that we're taking them in and we have a reserve and we're picking up the ones a week later. I don't know how that works.
Okay, I can look and see, because our outlying station has some as well. So
Okay.
I'll see how many we rent and how much it would be to cost up front versus a monthly. I can
Okay,
do that and get back to you.
thank you.
Any further questions on the item? Commissioner Donkey?
Yes, to indicate what Commissioner Korn said, Alan, I do the same thing where I own the tank, but with Oxark, even as owning it, it's a swap out when I want to refill. So the tank physically changes to a different tank for a refill, but I'm the owner of the tank. So I agree it would be worth just verifying what all the options are and what's the most cost effective. When I did my review for the type of gas that I use, I did find it was more cost effective in the long run to be the owner of the tank.
All right. Any further questions?
Nope.
All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
Based on the information before us, I move to approve payment of the FY25 BCASD claims in batch number 27 totaling $65,589.29.
There's a motion and a second.
Seconded.
Any public comment? Seeing none, deliberation by the board. Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Korn?
Yes.
We did consent agenda.
We did the order.
Oh, so let's go back. I thought we did consent agenda. All right, so we'll entertain a motion regarding the consent agenda to approve the minutes.
Based
I
on the
did skip that
information
one.
before us, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Seconded.
Any comment from the public on this item? Seeing none, any deliberation by the board? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Korn?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Commissioner Donkey?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes, I see. You had 2 motions on 1 page. Sorry about that. I didn't see that. All right. Next item up is our action, discussion, decision regarding public budget hearing.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Lindsay for the record, Bonner County EMS. The first thing I have here is our budget hearing request, public budget hearing request. Bonner County EMS wishes to set the date, time, and location of the budget hearing. I don't have a date, time set because that was something I wanted to discuss with the Commissioners before I did that. And so we need to come up with a date and time, but I'm going to ask that we discuss that to where we come up with something. One of the things that we've mentioned is in the past, we have had it on the same day as the county budget hearing for the county budget, and making sure that we said, this is the ambulance district budget versus the county budget. I don't know if you guys want to continue doing it that way. I kind of talked to Jessica a little bit about that option yesterday. If we want to do it that way, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It's just as long as everybody knows that this is the ambulance district budget and this is the county general revenue budget. So
I think yours should be a standalone meeting.
okay.
On its own day, mostly because I think that there's a lot to look at. Are you prepared? Have you worked on what your kind of idea of the next budget is? So are you wanting us to pick a date now and just get it scheduled?
Yes. So what our new, which he says he's online, and can chime in when he needs to. Bill, our new legal representation, he just said it needs to be sometime towards the end of August to do that. And then what I was looking at is, do we want to just do it in conjunction with our what am I trying to say? Our second meeting in August, which would be the 20th. That made the most sense. Is just do it on our regular meeting day. But we can certainly do it on another day.
Well, we have to have this done sooner. Am I wrong? Is August too far in?
Nope. So we would have, I think you're looking at two different things. So like if we have a workshop or something where they're discussing the budget with the board, and you want public.
Right. So they're picking
but
their
the actual
final date.
presentation of the budget and where you're voting to accept it is what he's
That's-
talking about,
yes.
which would be after it's been published and all of those things.
So I think August 20th then would work for that meeting. I just want to make sure we're scheduling the meetings with the board before we get to that point. So I don't have a problem using the August 20th Wednesday already scheduled date and adding that on to that date. I think that's not unreasonable. What does the rest of the board think about that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, and does that work for Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
So with that, do you want me to, oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off?
Nope.
Do you want me to, do you want to make a motion or do I need to? Or because I didn't really have one with the date on it.
This is not really a motion. You're actually just going to notice that you're going to add that to
Okay.
that meeting. It's just a discussion of what a date is.
Okay,
So it's,
perfect.
you can just add it. Anything else on that then?
I do not.
Okay. Next item, miscellaneous tasks. Task list review and update. Commissioner Domke.
Yes, thank you. So wanted to go through quickly what we have as our high priority tasks. The current high priority tasks, I apologize, wasn't set up for sharing, were the budget neutral objective, to come up with a multi-year budget plan. I believe that will be a part of the discussion for the upcoming budget meetings that were just discussed, because as we're looking at fiscal year 26, I believe we'll also needing to be projecting ahead to understand the future need for TANs and things of that nature. So if that's in progress. And so I think we are on the right track with that. We just need to start scheduling those initial hearings to work through the budget. Does anybody have anything new or different on that item?
Not on that item. Do you have more high priority tasks or is that
I
it? for-
do. I do, Commissioner. I have to establish the appropriate legal relationship between the ambulance service district and Bonner County. I know that our attorney has indicated that he believes a joint powers agreement would be the best vehicle to use for that. And so now that we have the attorney on board and that initial opinion, I suggest that we add this to our next agenda to be able to start to talk about the details of what would be included in the JPA.
I'd agree.
Any further thoughts on that topic?
Chief Lindsay, any comment or
I don't. The only comment I would have is if we.
can you use the
Oh,
microphone?
sorry.
If the board is going to use our our attorney, Bill, then if we could go ahead and ask him whatever questions, that way he can get on his way.
And thank you, Chief. One of the things, Bill, I believe you mentioned in your response back to our board questions was that one of your associates in the firm could present some examples of other ambulance service districts in the state and what types of in-county versus outside third-party services they use so that we could look at those different examples and consider those options to help guide what the JPA details would look like.
Yeah, Commissioner and Chairman. So I think there's two issues here that we're talking about. The first one is what the relationship between EMS, so the emergency, the ambulance district and the county is, and if there's shared services, what does that look like? Is there a service fee that's paid by the ambulance district to the county? Does it make more sense to bring it in-house? That one, I'm happy to advise as necessary, but that's sort of a service by service, case by case analysis that your chief can run, and I'm happy to provide input as needed. Where I thought it might be valuable to bring my business partner, Bill Gigray, in is if we're looking at a reorganization of the ambulance district into basically a new district with new boundaries. The boundaries don't have to change much, but different boundaries. And there's a series of reasons you might do that, both operational and financial. That's where I would suggest maybe bringing my business partner, Bill Gigray, in. He's done that on 3 other occasions.
Thank you for the clarification, Bill. Yes, and that is one of our tasks is to look at the legal structure of the ambulance district and determine if we want to maintain the current structure or pursue a different structure. So I think my opinion to the rest of the board would be it's valuable to schedule that conversation so we can hear some of the reasons for the pros and cons for the alternative methods of organization of the ambulance district for our future consideration.
Would that meeting also be the proper time to discuss the options and the pros and cons to dissolving the ambulance district and recreating it?
Yes, Commissioner, that would be essentially the same conversation.
Okay.
And then we also have a task to define the future desired level of service. And I know that's been an ongoing conversation in our meetings as we talk about staff levels and budget. And so I think we need to continue to have that conversation and also identify what metric we're going to use to determine when or if we should be adding staff and or vehicles, things of that nature, to meet the demand for the level of service. And so that's something I believe, again, should be also in concert with the conversation we have about the future budget.
So can I jump in and ask that, and you need to, if you guys are wanting, it sounds like a meeting that, and partly you're asking Bill to participate in that presentation of options of what the structure is, whether you dissolve and recreate, whether you do a JPA, that I think what needs to happen is you guys need to identify who is going to take the next additional steps of scheduling the meeting, who you're inviting, and who gets charged the fee for the county taking the look at what your options are versus Bonner County EMS paying the fee for the services of a presentation by legal counsel. Because that was one of the things that we talked about was now that you're using an outside attorney, there's a fee associated with the consultations. And so we need to address that and then move forward with, if the desire is to schedule that meeting, that we ask Bill to kind of coordinate with our assistant to identify what an open time would be for his staff to do that type of presentation to our board, and then an estimated cost. My personal thought is for this type of a discussion, that's a fee that the county has to absorb if the county is wanting to look at changing the structure, since the county is overseeing that aspect. So does that make sense?
I think it does make sense, and then we'd have to understand how that type of billing would happen based on which entity the agreement is with. But yes, I agree that should all be clarified.
So what I would like to see then is that Commissioner Domke, since you brought it up, that you write what the scope is for the meeting that you want, and that we send that over to Bill's office so that he can give that estimated cost, but also that the board and the public know what the conversation is, so that everyone can come prepared for that discussion. So I heard you, there's the discussion about dissolving, there's a discussion about, whether it makes sense to do the JPA, and then the interrelationship between the county and EMS also to address. But if we had that in writing with the scope of what your request is, then we can take that, get an answer on some dates, and then start scheduling that meeting. And I think that type of meeting should come sooner than later, because we need to be working on the budget of the ambulance district and what those services look like. And personnel is a huge factor. And when we did the rate meeting, I said many times that the foundation of the ambulance district is the availability of service, and we have to focus on what does that look like in Bonner County. The end user they're two different sections, but we have to look at what the availability costs Bonner County. So if you could do that, we could move forward with taking a look at that.
Yes, I'll plan to work with Chief Lindsay, come up with a draft scope to bring forward to the next meeting so we can solidify that and then schedule. And then the last thing that will dovetail into that's on the high priority list was to finish identifying which services we wanted to request to be in-house through Bonner County versus from third parties. And so I think that all plays together within that greater conversation we were just having.
Could I make the argument that if there's a desire to look at the structure of the ambulance district, which could change that necessarily the idea of what do they interface with the county, would be better had after we determine the structure? A JPA versus dissolving and rebuilding could potentially impact what services you'd use in the county. And so right now we've identified outside counsel and bookkeeping that will address payroll, and we've addressed kind of the financial aspect.
I'd agree with that. I think out of the three priority tasks there that he's identified, I think number 2 should be the top priority. We need to get that out of the way so we can understand better which direction we're going. And also in that meeting, Brian, are we I think we should invite the county attorney to that meeting also. Bill Wilson or Lewis, one of the two.
I agree. Yep, I'll be happy to work on that.
Anything else, Commissioner Domke?
No, those were the high priority tasks we've identified.
All right, thank you. Next item was an update on the TAN.
Okay, yes, I have that right here. So the question that you asked me, Commissioner, I believe the last meeting was to get an idea of the cost of the TAN that we're looking at. And so what I did was working with the bank on that. I think I've got a pretty good idea of how much we're looking at cost-wise. The previous TAN we did, we used a company out of Boise, and they charged us roughly $600 an hour, and that was for 19 hours. So that roughly came out to $11,000. With our new legal hired, that rate is a little south of $200 an hour. So depending on how long it takes, that rate or that cost is going to be significantly lower when you look at a significantly lower hourly rate. And just using their hours they put in, which was 19, if it took us the same amount of time or took our attorney the same amount of time, that's roughly $4,000. So much less. We also have bank fees that are associated with a TAN. That's 0.175% of the loan at closing. If you did an $800,000 loan, which is probably what I'm going to be requesting, depending on where we're at when that time comes, that's roughly $1,400. And then whatever interest on whatever we borrow, so we have to pay that back as well. So that's going to be your cost. So if you add those in, you're looking at roughly, depending on what the interest is on what we borrow, you're still looking at probably around 10 grand.
Can I ask you some questions on what
Sure.
you reported? So when we did the TAN for this year, it was $2 million availability.
Correct.
So can I ask you to confirm, are you saying that the next TAN will only be a request for a total of $800,000 availability? Or are you saying you would pull an $800,000 into your budget but request a $2 million TAN?
No, we're not requesting a $2 million TAN. We would request $800,000 as a total. Again, that could change depending on, I'm saying at this juncture in our existence, I'm saying I would want no more than $800,000 because we are paying 0.175 on that amount we borrowed. So if we don't have to borrow, like this year, we used $500,000. We probably didn't even need all $500,000, but we did get $500,000 and we paid that back, and we have to pay the interest and everything else on it. So if we can lower that amount, then and again, this is all learning curve. I've never done a TAN before, so.
No worries. I appreciate the work that you did put into it. So my request is that when we're looking at the TAN, we have some data that we can use to justify what the TAN should look like for you, because the big part, and comptroller can correct me and treasurer on this one, was we were waiting for the dump of money into your account at the end of January. And so the biggest driving factor from the October to that January dump was your staffing costs. And so you don't have enough staffing costs to operate through that period of time. So that dollar amount actually can be identified as an objective number to use for the TAN. And then above that dollar amount is reasonable to have available, but we know we have more evidence to use to justify what your TAN would be.
Right.
I agree that if it looks that the 2 million may not have necessarily needed to be available to you, and you would reduce the interest that was paid on the overall availability of use. But I think we have the ability to be more specific to the community on the decision of what the TAN looks like, because that actually shows also improvement in your budget, because when we looked last go around, your budget was able to identify a probable availability of $400,000, which was equivalent to what we dropped in from the Tribal Consistency Fund. And so being able to use evidence of why you don't need that availability is beneficial to the budget, but also to community accepting that we're moving in the right direction. And so I want to give an opportunity for clerk's office to say a comment on if during the period of time from October to January, his driving factor was being able to make payroll during that period of time till the dump. And so now we've shown that as we go from January until we get to July, he's actually functioned without needing the availability of the TAN. And so it looks like the dollar amount that you need available during that time is actually around $500-something thousand. And so it's reasonable to say your pool would be $500,000 in the October to get you through. Just grab the microphone. I know you go up and down. But that's about what the staffing dollars cost. And then a little bit extra above just in case your January drop in your budget doesn't, that it gives you a cushion of availability. And so when I look at what your actual costs were and what we needed, it's reasonable to say maybe have $1 million TAN, not $800,000 by what I looked at. So I'll say to Clerk Rosedale.
So that sounds right. I think what we do is we should wait until after we get the July receipts though, because last year around July, we put in 1.5 million of local tribal consistency funds and another 400. So we're not putting that 1.5 in this, so it'd be best just to wait and make sure everything flushes out, because you may want to do, like I said, $1 million and take way less. But before you cap it artificially, I would make sure that.
And that's why I said what I did. This is in no way,
I understand. This is a
it's
discussion on the
concrete.
TAN.
This
It wasn't-
moves, the goal moves as we go through.
And that's why we have the conversation about it, so we can put the information forward, because the other thing that we'll start to see the adjustment on is we're starting to pay for services out of the ambulance district budget, which we haven't been doing before. So we are going to have an insurance payment that's due. We have attorney bills, and we have a bookkeeper now, which we did not have those bills coming in. We also have a difference of the claims that are generated by the ambulance district need to come out of the ambulance district. So we haven't experienced what that looks like in a full fiscal year. And so I want to make sure that our TAN request is reflecting that the purpose is the availability of knowing that we can pull from that and continue to operate until we know what does that look like in terms of structure, because that's a big difference for the ambulance district. And for me, I think you're a little bit closer to needing $1 million TAN, maybe a little bit more, but I also agree that seeing your drop from your July will help to give a bigger view of what we kind of anticipate once we get to the end of the fiscal year. So I want to make sure we know that we're potentially just going to need to raise the TAN availability. But you did, the way you presented it was spot on. I'm just giving a view of, we can add some concrete information that helps us. You have to let the community know that we're doing our due diligence to research it, and that the numbers that we are using have an objective foundational argument as to why we're using them. And we can do that by looking at staffing and then the additional costs that we're going to be facing. We also have to address availability of, we didn't run a levy. We are going to have some foregone pulled in, but we also have vehicles and other things that could potentially cost. If I remember, we have an ambulance that's a little bit on life support,
Go
right?
back down to Court Lane in 2 weeks, see if they can figure it out finally.
Right, and so the cost of the ambulance, they're on their own, is very expensive. And so we are, because we have 4, that's what people are expecting to see. So Clerk Rosedale.
So we do have Oregon, but it's much less fantastic news. It's going to take years to actually recover
Yep.
them because we're only gonna get like $30,000 to $40,000 every year in foregone. Because it'll just be 1%.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Nope, and it's not a big dump, but looking at the whole change that we're going to see is important, because one of the things I think as a community we need to make sure that we're telling is we needed to be talking about that foregone every time we did a budget so that people knew it was in the past so that it could have been used forward, because we have a learning experience on this, because what we could have done was address some of the foregone on the capital construction. I think that there's also a need to pay attention to, do we need to have a capital fund set aside for some of the things that we need repaired? Because we're not lifting up with a levy, and we have needs, so I just want to put that forward. Any other comments on the TAN?
I have one. So I guess I must have missed something somewheres, but we're looking at getting a separate TAN or a new TAN? Is that
Yes,
because of the separation?
No, they have to, a TAN's only good for 1 year.
Oh, I thought it was renewable. That's why
No,
we
they
weren't
can do
paying
an
the,
extension in September, they can ask for an extension and then pay it back in January when they get their tax tranche for next year. But no, it's each year would be something that they have to apply for.
needs to
again.
be paid off, wiped out, and reapplied.
Correct.
Thank you.
And so what we tried, and we had it in a different meeting discussion to see if we tried to apply for a renewed before the end of fiscal year, and that wouldn't work. So it's a full-on new one, because we also researched to see if it was going to be something that, since we already had the documents drafted and paid, and I want to correct, I believe the cost of writing the TAN from that attorney wasn't billed to us by hour, it was a flat fee that she charged. It wasn't an hourly fee. And so one of the things that was researched was, is it just as easy for us in-house to kind of check the boxes for the same exact thing for next year? And that wasn't an available option presented by the person who wrote that document for us. And so when we were looking for attorneys, when Bill said he had experience with writing the TAN, that was an opportunity for cost savings for the ambulance district. So that's why we have to do it every time. Any other questions? All right. Next item is the budget update.
Okay, so 2 parts to this. One, I submitted the EMS financial forecast for everyone to look at. And again, I do this every meeting, and that number I can tell you will change, but I've tried to stay on top of that as best as I could, trying to predict cost. Again, I don't have a good idea of how much we're going to be using, like our legal. I know we're going to be using them a lot probably out the gate, but it's one of those things where as we move along, I'll be able to get a better idea of that. And then as far as like insurance and bookkeeping and costs like that, insurance, we're hoping to have a good idea on that here actually today, because I got to get it in time for the next meeting. And then, when is the next meeting? It's not next week, is it?
No.
Okay.
It's a week after.
Anyway, yeah, I'll have a better idea of cost that we don't necessarily currently pay for, especially as we get approved for insurance and that sort of thing. So I'll be able to better capture that. But that's basically what we have now without adding in these extra costs. And then the other piece of the budget update I wanted to do was the bank account info. I know Commissioner Williams, you had mentioned to update that. So when we...
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Before we do that? Do we need Bill to be online still, or can he?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I do not.
All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Bill, or can we release him?
I don't have any.
No more at this time, thank you.
All right. Bill,
Thank
if
you,
you'd
Bill.
like to sign off, you can. I thank you for your time and being available.
No problem. Thank you, commissioners. We'll be in touch.
Bill's probably wondering if the county's burning down up here with the amount of fire engines just went past. So bank accounts, that's something that I've been sweating, thinking about, is changing bank accounts. And when I say that, I mean, when you're in the ambulance service business, everything you have is tied to your bank account. So all your billing, your Medicaid, Medicare, all these payers that pay us, they pay into that account. So if you were to go and do something like change a bank account number with the government, it's absolutely, I mean, it could cause us a huge hiccup. So thank you to Clarissa for working with Joe at Umpqua Bank, Joe Williams at Umpqua Bank, to get some answers on how hard it would be for us to change our accounts from a county-owned account to an ambulance district account. And I'm going to run down through this, and I told Clarissa, if I mess up, if the train runs off the tracks, feel free to jump in. But it sounds like, per Joe, we will have to shut down the main account because that's the one the county has. And then we would immediately need to go and get, same day, open a new account, which would be the ambulance district account. Now, we couldn't close that first account because it would still have checks potentially coming out of it. So they would have to keep that open until the checks cleared. The big piece of that is it has to be less than 250,000 because FDIC only insures up to 250,000. Anything over that, they don't insure. So we'd have to make sure that's the big, I guess, thing we have to work out on this point, is making sure that it doesn't go over that. We don't have $350,000 in checks coming out of it or something to that effect. And then the main piece that I liked was seeing is that they had, so they call it the sweep account, and I could be misstating this, but the sweep account is where our electronic fund transfers come into, and that's what grabs it. So if we were to lose that, that would be the one that we would have to reapply with Medicaid and Medicare and all of them. We'd have to reapply to all of our payers to try to get payment. So we don't have to do that. Sounds like we can do this with just changing the main account, leaving our ancillary and sweep account, and then leaving that old Bonner County account open until the checks were taken care of, and then that would officially close, and our new one would be the one we were up and running with. Did I do that okay? Okay.
So would that sweep account just deposit into the new account instead of the existing account? So you don't have to change that account?
So what we're going to do is the current warrant account that Bonner County has, that's the part that will be segregated from EMS. We will keep that under county control to allow any outstanding checks to still clear out of it. We will make sure that there are enough funds in that account to satisfy what needs to still clear. Like Jeff mentioned, though, we have to just make sure that that amount won't exceed $250,000 because it will not be connected to the sweep account anymore, which is collateralized with the bank. That's how we get away from having to keep under $250,000 for any account that we have. So Jeff will then open his own, in a sense, warrant checking account, which he will write checks off of starting on July 1st. That will automatically be connected to that existing sweep. So things will just sweep back and forth the way they work. And that's how he draws interest as well. It's part of like being in an interest-bearing account. So we have a plan. It's a plan that will make it much easier for them. I do believe we can stay under the $250,000 because we're kind of going through some of the checks that are still in there right now, cleaning up some things. They'll only have one more payroll that will come out. So I think we'll be in good shape for that.
And so it makes it very easy since you don't have to get rid of the sweep and it's only the
Right.
main and we don't have to redo everything because that would be a nightmare to redo. But when we're talking about how we structure the ambulance district, the idea of the financial aspect and the banking and account has to come into play because that's a significant build, especially when you talk about the federal stuff makes it very messy if you have to change that.
You just have to make sure all the funds are insured. So that's why we have to stay under 250 to allow him to have that existing sweep account, which is where all of his ACH deposits are going into.
Yeah. And so what is the time frame that?
That's my next point.
Okay.
Timeline. So a couple of days to open the account, according to Joe, a week or so to get the proposal for approval for you guys to sign for the account. And then the big one was a couple of weeks for the checks, which our bookkeeper, I'm assuming our bookkeeper would order.
We'll
So,
probably, well, you can work with her. I can give you some options on where to order checks. We get them fairly inexpensive, so.
So we want to make sure there's, especially once we get to July and that first payroll, that is a smooth transition and people don't have an interruption. What is the time frame that you're going to start working on it?
like now,
Okay.
yeah. And that's all I had on the budget, just those two things.
I had a question on your budget, Chief. The way I'm looking at all these numbers, it looks like at the end of fiscal year '25, we should have $800,000, $900,000 cash available. Is that what I'm seeing here?
That's projected. That's absolutely projected. That's a scientific, wild, you-know-what guess.
Right.
And so that's just taking into what we've been burning through, taking into account the fact that we'll get a tax levy of 1.1, hopefully somewhere around in there. So if any of those, if for some reason we run into higher costs, that number comes down. So that's why I try to do this every meeting, so we can just stay real time on what the expectations are.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Is there a possibility that we would need a 10? If we end up with $800,000 at
I think
October
so.
1st?
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because I think, we might have like $3 in the account come the end of January before we get our next levy, and we don't want to do that.
Right.
So I think at this point, that's why I said the 800,000 earlier, because again, what I don't want to do is pay, I don't want to over or under, either way. And again, that number could change. It could change to $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever. But I think the big one is the farther we go out on our payroll, and when I say that, I mean the farther we go out looking at our payroll on real time as we're doing now with the 4 employees gone, we can actually project that out for, because that's my thing is I like data that's clean. So, those employees were gone end of February or whenever that was. So now we've had March and April to look at it. So I think as we project those numbers, we'll have a way better idea. But even if we had 887,000, even if that was the exact number we had, last year we had 888. I think it was 888.
Yeah,
This
it's
number
not-
sticks out in my head, and we were still about 90,000 short.
I think the thing is that you have to remember is that starting budget, it's the available cash that is needed in the account. And so that gets depleted through payroll. And so that's what happened at the beginning of the year. And so as your available cash goes down, it triggers Clarissa to have to notify the clerk that you don't have cash available because your budget is dependent on the drops in your budget. And so you can't go so low that it creates that issue. And so it puts you exactly in the same position that we were in last year if you end on that dollar amount, which wasn't sufficient
Right.
and required
No.
a TAN.
Well, and I would argue that a little bit because last year we had 4 more employees and our benefits are going to be different this year. I'm being told that our benefits, hopefully that cost will come down because we'll be doing separate benefits and what the county is as an ambulance district. So hopefully there's some things that play into that. However, we will have other costs that we didn't have.
You're gonna basically be the same, because for the money you saved by the people you lost, you have costs that have come into the budget that you didn't have before. And so we're going to be in a position where you don't want to go below that $500,000, because the goal, we have to have the goal of, there needs to be a reserve that addresses your availability of payroll, which is actually $2 million. So that you can go from one side, what your October through. Starting with 800 isn't enough to cover payroll until January and keep your available cash down. And that's where the TAN comes in, is you need it for that reason. And the reason why I want to stress that is that problem isn't going away in 1 and 2 years, because you will not have built up the cash reserve. The cash reserve has to get built up in your account. This number reflects, and I want to make sure we say it here, last year you got 400 right before dumped in. This number actually reflects cost savings that the ambulance district put in that are equivalent to the injection of that 400. And that's a really good improvement in the budget, to be able to put that money in a short period of time, to where we are showing that we've done a good job of looking at the budget. It's just not enough not to need a TAN. By cost projections, the need for a TAN looks like a minimum of 3 years. It's that, and I argue that could even extend, because your foregone doesn't catch you up, and your needs of service is going to continue to increase. And so we're drawing down the available cash. So I don't want people to be surprised when we keep asking for the TAN, because 800, it doesn't cover it. Because you can't let it go to zero. It's not like your personal, where you can say, I'm going to get paid in 2 weeks, so I'm going to draw my bank account down. You can't do that to the treasurer's office. So, okay.
Okay.
I heard Bonner
I'm
County
like,
District.
I had to hear that like 4 times earlier. Now I'm hearing it again.
There you go.
All right.
Sorry.
That's all I had.
On the upside too, is our anticipated building revenue should be higher next
Correct.
October, November, December than it was this year,
Yeah.
this fiscal year.
Yeah. And again, that's.
Can we change it to May? I think people, the change doesn't, the majority of your billing is Medicaid, Medicare. And I don't want people to think we're gonna get a windfall of money from a rate adjustment. You're
Right.
going to get
Maybe 10% is what I was
and
told, but
that's
high side.
that is high side, so I don't want us to,
10% is private pay.
It's probably most of that's going to be coming from your commercial payers.
Gotcha.
Because self-pay, they
the percentage increase doesn't address the majority of the people that get billed. It only reflects your commercial side and your self-pay. And so that's not the greater chunk of the
and we won't
service.
see that for quite some time, because the way our billing works is that we bill, let's say we bill you today, Commissioner, we might see that money 3 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
So it could take a while to appreciate that change. But again, we've been going up every year, so hopefully that'll.
Did you schedule them to come in and honk the horn and do lights during the meeting?
They're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. One of the things that Clerk Rosedale brought up, and I do think we need to have a meeting so we show that we vetted this issue, is in terms of billing and collections, and it's selling debt. And is there a viable option to do that for bills that are not recovered? And so I do think that there's a need to make sure that we're not missing an opportunity to ensure that those that are commercial and private pay, who don't actually pay the bill, if there's a way to recover debt that we incur by services. It's always something, when you're in a service industry, we have to make sure we've addressed that question on the community side. So maybe that's another a budget item to look at if we were going to use a debt collection service.
We do use a debt collection service. We already do all this. This is already in place.
So we need to have that discussion then that shows what is your recovery of debt and what is the cost of your debt collection.
We would just have to
service.
have them give that information and.
Yeah,
So do you sell the debt to them for a premium and then you just get discounted cash up front?
I don't sell them anything.
No, the debt, yeah. I
The-
mean,
but
I
you
don't-
No,
can
I
sell the
don't,
debt.
I don't know. You're asking me questions I don't know the answer to. I can find the answer to it.
$1,000 collectible debt.
Yeah.
And you think, you could give it to them, they'll promise you $800 or they'll pay you $800 for it and the risk is on them.
Can I answer this one?
That's a Sarah question.
All right, so what we do is they place their interest on whatever the balance is, and they collect their interest rate from the consumer, and we get whatever debt amount that was sent to them.
They get the interest.
They get the interest and we get the debt.
do you get recovery through that?
We're getting like 2-3, there was one $6,000 check a couple months ago. I mean, they're very good.
Okay, I think that's something that you want to pull into your meeting that explains what we're doing to ensure those costs are recovered, because that's part of giving a little bit more transparency into how the ambulance district financially is operating for all of the different lines that can impact the service industry. So thank you, Sarah.
And there's no cost to us, doesn't sound like.
No.
So,
Correct, we don't.
great.
Just a matter of the wage to turn it all in.
Yep.
I just have a couple things that I think you guys need to consider for a future meeting that's quick on the calendar. And that would be, what the process, who's gonna be the signer on the checks from EMS now? Like, once they transition, who's signing the checks? How is that process gonna work? Is it gonna be a commissioner? Like, we'll have to have that set up with Joe, who the signers are and how you guys are gonna function with that. EMS will need to obtain their own credit cards, right? Right now, it's through the county. I'm assuming that will also be stopping June 30, so we need to work that out. So
We were working on that today too. Yep.
and then, and then just how much, if any, assistance does EMS want from the clerk's office in preparing their budget this year?
So, my recommendation on that aspect is that EMS work very close with the clerks and commissioners on this year's budget so that the expectations and kind of the structure, because as a county, we're trying to do a more transparent, more visibility in the budget on the county side. And since we are going to continue with the auditing the same that we did this year with, in terms of relation to the county, I think if we use this budget as an opportunity to show and strengthen the EMS the same way we're trying to do with the county, then the next go round, it can be pushed on to them because they will have been given the tools. Does that work for?
Yeah, that's kind of what we had discussed yesterday.
I do think I think we should probably all reach out to the outside auditor and just see, because the way that they're being reported currently on our financials is due to the fact that they're in Munis, it's all in the same financial system, and it won't be next year. So it could be a little bit different.
And
but
so-
we'll confirm with them.
I would say, why not Chief Lindsay reach out to the external auditor to understand that process, because that's also a function of the district, and that might be something that, depending on restructuring, if there is a decision to go JPA or dissolve or rebuild, the auditing aspect would actually play a role in that as well. Anything else? So I have a request that that Chief Lindsay, that we spend a good, like, scheduling time with the clerk's office regarding the budget, so that we do, because we're not wanting just, this is the dollar amount this go round, we want to give more information. That way we're doing a similar style of drilling down a little bit more. Anything else? Commissioner Korn?
Nope.
Commissioner Domke?
Nothing else today, thank you.
Commissioner Domke, can we use your stamp on the item that you approved?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it is 11:55 and this meeting is adjourned.